24/7 Gamer.
Welcome to 24/7 Gamer. I'm your host, Jonathan Drubner, fresh off the 10th anniversary of E3. Man, I miss it already.
To commemorate the anniversary, E3 brought in the traveling history of video game, and with it came the old school video game pioneers.
The E3 for the first time is looking back at its own history of their show and also the entire game industry.
As you can see, the museum was a blast. A look back at all the games that paved the way for E3. And that's what E3 is. It's games. So let's get to them. This is the E3 retrospective. A look back at the games that drove the expo.
1995. Going into the first E3, the two major consoles were the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, and both kicked off the festivities with a bang. Vector Man was unveiled for the Genesis, a disturbing yet Sega-esque look at the future, and arcade hits Mortal Kombat 3 and Killer Instinct were ported to the Super Nintendo, and I don't have to tell you how big that news was. But it wasn't the biggest news. The first E3 saw 5 new consoles enter into the fray. Atari introduced what would unfortunately be their last console, the Jaguar CD. While it did give us the lovable Frenchman Raymond, it didn't give gamers much else. Sega brought forth the Saturn, chock full of oddity. But it was expensive, difficult to develop games for, and sadly, short-lived. And Nintendo stepped up with the Virtual Boy in all its 3D goggle glory. But they quickly stepped back. For Nintendo's big idea that year was a legend, the Nintendo 64. It still rolled with the old school cartridges, but it rocked some great games. But then there was Sony and the PlayStation. Not only did they come with awesome games like arcade hit Tekken, the next-gen graphics, gameplay, and attitude of Twisted Metal let people know they came to play. The only bad thing about the first E3? While Shaq wouldn't come to the Lakers until '96, Shaq Fu hit the Expo in '95. It was kind of an airball. And a foul. 1996. In '96, another console was announced, Apple's Pippin. You never heard of it because it never came out. In '96, Nintendo came out guns a-blazing. Legendary game developer Miyamoto changed the way 3D games were made and played with what some consider the best Mario game of all time, Super Mario 64. They also introduced us to Turok, the dinosaur hunter, and the huge Star Wars hit, Shadows of the Empire. While PS1 gave us Gran Turismo and a little bandicoot named Crash. 1997. E3 '97 brought more of the same. Game. Nintendo and Sony battling it out. Nintendo showed Star Fox 64, a kick-ass shooter reborn from Super Nintendo. But more importantly, N64 Bond game movement with GoldenEye 007. Quite possibly the best, most replayable N64 title ever. People still won't shut up about it. But it wasn't all Nintendo. PlayStation 1 changed gaming in their own special way. The Resident Evil series was born, and with it, the survival horror genre. It was scary, a whole new video game experience. And while it may not have looked great, it did introduce a new cinematic style of presenting games.
Jill and I will stay in the hall in case of an emergency.
Wesker? Jill?
What is that?
I'll go and check.
I don't know what happened.
Barry? Where's Barry? What happened to Jill and Wesker?
Chris, take care.
Me gusta. As for a new style of playing games, Sony brought the Final Fantasy series back to the US after a 4-year hiatus. Final Fantasy VII, the first hugely successful console role-playing game. It featured a great story, amazing cutscenes, and proved to be very, very addictive. On the weird tip, Parappa the Rapper came to the PS1. Parappa D was one of the first rhythm-based games with cute characters and fun songs. Way to go, yo. And on the weirder tip, Sega unveiled Saturn Knights, straight from the people who gave us Sonic. In this flying adventure, 2 kids plagued by nightmares team up with a jester named Knight to rescue the Land of Dreams. It gained a cult following, but cults are weird. 1998.
As 1998 rolled around, the cute and cuddly infancy of E3 came to a close. And while the console train was moving and grooving, it would be the PC games that would dominate the new E3 era, its adolescence.
Games like the epic Unreal, and Half-Life, the action shooter that's many mods ended up conquering the world. Plus EverQuest, one of the first massively multiplayer online role-playing games on the PC, and also the most successful. And StarCraft, the online strategy game from Blizzard that helped create a new breed of athlete, the professional gamer. And of course, consoles didn't just disappear. N64 kept the hits coming with the E3 unveiling of one of the most popular Zelda games ever, Ocarina of Time. And Metal Gear Solid showed up on the PS1 and pretty much started the whole stealth genre.
What's a Russian gunship doing here?
I have no idea.
And Sega bestowed upon us another gem of a console, their last, the Dreamcast. It had a built-in modem and sweet memory cards with LCD screens that played minigames. The Dreamcast was awesome, but unfortunately, there was a limitation on the horizon. 1999. By 1999, E3 was partying like it was 2000. PC games continued to amaze with Black and White, Peter Molyneux's groundbreaking strategy game in which gamers were able to play as a god, feed people to animals and everything. Not to mention Deus Ex, a bring-down-the-terrorists RPG with an X-Files vibe. Undoubtedly one of the best storylines ever seen in a game.
Let it spill over to the schools and churches. Let the bodies pile up in the streets. They'll beg us to save them.
And of course, The Sims, the glorious evolution of the Max Sim series. No longer were we farming ants and raising buildings, we was making people. Lots of people would be making people. On the console side in '99, N64 had Perfect Dark, while newcomer Dreamcast lit it up with Soul Calibur, one of the best fighters and biggest arcade smashes ever. And Driver was announced that year on the PS1, with some of the most realistic driving physics ever seen in a game. This was one of the first titles featuring an open-ended environment and one of the last smash hits on the PS1. But for good reason. For on display that year, our first glimpse of the PS2. Ring a bell? 2000.
2000 was one tough year to be a computer. First, that whole Millennium Bug thing, and then, well, let's just say that E3's preteen years would see PC games green with envy.
Ah yes, 2000 would go down as the year that Microsoft decided to take the rest of our money, announcing their plunge into the console pool with the Xbox. Of course, Xbox wouldn't have been Xbox had they not unveiled a little game called Halo, which sold over 4.5 million copies. So the two pretty much go hand in hand.
Good to see you, Master Chief. Things aren't going well.
Meanwhile, the other powerhouse, the PS2, was kicking ass with a series of big titles, including Street Fighter EX3 and the groundbreaking snowboard romp SSX, one of the first extreme sports titles. Not to be outshined, Dreamcast showcased one of the first cel-shaded games ever, Jet Grind Radio, a glorious look at Tokyo through the eyes of a graffiti-spraying rollerblader. Extreme. Now, do yourself a favor, don't think PC games fell off. Oh no, they never will. Return to Castle Wolfenstein, updated from the old school game, was one of the first shooters and played a huge part in the birth of the you versus a bunch of creepy evil dudes war games.
And be mindful of the locals too. Yeah, they don't seem too happy to see us either.
2001. Just as Sony and Microsoft began to divide and conquer the world, Nintendo stepped up once again to claim its territory. They reinvented the portable with the Game Boy Advance, which featured a bigger, fresher screen and living color. But Nintendo had bigger things on their minds. Though not that much bigger. In size, that is. The Nintendo GameCube. The Cube was a perfect evolution of the Nintendo way, with all your favorite characters, as seen here in Super Smash Bros. Melee, and a bunch of brand new ones, like Pikmin, the crazy puzzle game which gave gamers the opportunity to make a bunch of little things make a bunch of big things. Nintendo also announced Star Wars Rogue Leader Rogue Squadron. Star Wars games ever. Period.
Red Leader, nice shot. Let's close it up. Got it.
But lest we forget, 2001 out year for the PS2, with Metal Gear Solid updated to the new console, once again evolving stealth and story. Sony also gave us innovation that year in the form of Dance Dance Revolution. Oh, and by the PC way, 2001 was the year The Sims unveiled plans to go online. It wouldn't happen for another year, but a lot of people remember where they were the day it was announced. Not one of them. But 2001 would not be without sadness. Dreamcast unveiled Choo Choo Rocket that year, the puzzle game involving saving mice from being eaten by cats by directing them into rocket ships. It had online play, but nobody played, and that was pretty much the story with the Dreamcast. Such a shame that...
Choo-choo rocket,
2002. 2002 saw console games continue to soar to unbelievable heights. Samus returned in Metroid Prime for the GameCube. It was the first time we'd seen her since the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy. Well, I did see her that one night in that bar on Planet Zebes, but she won't admit to that. And The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker was announced, and ended up selling 1 million copies. It was like a playable cartoon. And cartoons are awesome. Speaking of awesome, Super Mario Sunshine, the first Mario game for the GameCube. It broke convention and incorporated a water jetpack. And while I dug it, it wasn't what Nintendo heads were expecting, and they got real mad. On the PS2 side, a legend was born, Sam Fisher. Mr. Tom Clancy was nice enough to create this hero for us in Splinter Cell, and stealth action gaming was seen in a whole new light. Meanwhile, a legend was reborn, Tekken 4 on the PS2. Just when you thought fighting games were running out of room to grow, you thought wrong. But the biggest innovation of 2002 came from the minds of Microsoft, online play via Xbox Live. No longer were gamers sitting alone in dark rooms. With games like the epic Mech Assault, players were competing against friends the world over, not to mention talking trash via headsets. Of course, who didn't see that coming?
Online gaming was something we said, wouldn't it be great if we could hook this up to a telephone and have somebody, you know, be able to play on the other end? We were designing games in 1982. There would be a point-of-view tank game that you could play at your house and your friend could play at the other end. We were working on all this stuff then. So really, the main thing about the industry is we said, what took so long?
2003. I don't even know where to begin with 2003. Too many good games, too little time. Of course, the artist still known as Prince played his part, returning to all platforms in Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time. Never before had we seen such an acrobatic dagger wielder. And Soul Calibur made its illustrious return with SC2. The fighting was sick as ever, and a few special characters joined the fight. Hi, Hachi! Straight from the underground, the first Tony Hawk game with a storyline, Tony Hawk's Underground, aka Thug. New moves, new levels, and yes, face mapping. Man, that is one good-looking skate rap.
Whoa, not bad.
2003 was the year Ninja Gaiden got an Xbox facelift, and ended up being so difficult that a bunch of kids returned it. Shame on you nerds, look what you're missing. And on the GameCube, the return of Mario Kart Racing with double. So much fun to play, and so many pretty colors. Pretty. Also on the Cube, one of the biggest surprise hits ever, Beautiful Joe. Old school side-scrolling platform vibe with a spectacular new way to kick butt. Life is beautiful. But in 2000, you had to tip your hat to Sony. They stumbled upon something huge. The iToy, the tiny little webcam that put the gamer in the game. So much fun. It started with play, but quickly we were blessed with a number of serious smile makers. I can dance now. Thanks 2003. 2004. Man, is it 2004 already? Woo! E3 2004 was a look at the future, today. And the new direction of video games is, are you ready? Online, really small, and all about you. And of course, Halo 2.
What a ride, 10 glorious years. Now you know why I miss E3. But more importantly, now you know what you missed at a decade of E3s. For 24/7 Gamer, that's the E3 Retrospective, and I'm Jonathan Drubner. Until the next 10.